In the blistering heat of Arizona Territory, where the saguaros stood like silent sentinels guarding secrets of the desert, a woman named Nora huddled against the rough adobe wall of her family's crumbling ranch house, her frail hands trembling as she clutched a faded locket, the last remnant of a life before hunger and scorn had stripped her bare. But strength wasn't measured in whispers or fragile trinkets. It roared in the shadow of her sister Ingrid, whose towering frame eclipsed the doorway like a mountain come to life. And yet, on that fateful afternoon in 1872, it was Nora's quiet plea for a future that ignited a test no man could foresee, drawing a lone rancher into a trial of endurance that would shatter more than just his resolve. Nora's breath came in shallow gasps, the air thick with the scent of sun-baked earth and distant mesquite smoke. At 24, she was a wisp of a thing, her cheeks hollowed by months of scant meals and the relentless grip of drought that had withered their crops to dust. The ranch, once her father's pride on the outskirts of what would become Tucson, now teetered on ruin. Creditors circled like vultures, and the townsfolk, those pious settlers from back east, averted their eyes when she passed, murmuring about the cursed Svensk family who dared claim land so close to Apache trails. Ingrid, her elder by 5 years, had always been the shield. Born broad-shouldered and unyielding, with arms like knotted ropes from hauling water and mending fences, Ingrid towered over most men at nearly 6 feet. The locals called her the giantess behind her back, a jest that masked their fear, but Nora saw only fierce love in those storm-gray eyes. Ingrid stepped inside, her boots thudding against the packed dirt floor, wiping sweat from her brow with a calloused hand. "The well's drier than a preacher's sermon," she said, her voice a low rumble carrying the lilt of their Swedish mother's tongue. She dropped a sack of wilted greens scavenged from the wild onto the table, the thud echoing Nora's weary heart. "We can't hold out much longer, little one. Pa's debts are piling like storm clouds, and that snake Harlan Pritchard won't wait forever." Nora lifted her gaze, the locket warm against her palm. Inside, a miniature portrait of her late husband, Tomas, smiled back, a man taken by fever 2 winters past, leaving her childless and adrift in a world that valued women for their wombs and their silence. "What choice do we have? Sell the land? To who? The vultures in town see us as easy pickings." Her voice cracked, the weight of isolation pressing down. Towns like Tucson buzzed with gold fever and railroad dreams, but for women like Nora, foreign-born, unmarried again, and shadowed by rumors of their father's dealings with passing Apache traders, they were ghosts, unworthy of pity or partnership. Ingrid's jaw tightened, her massive frame filling the room as she poured the last of their coffee into 2 tin mugs. The steam rose like a fragile hope. "No, we fight. And for you, Nora, I find a man strong enough to stand with us, not some weak-kneed farmer from the valley, but one who can bear the load." She paused, her eyes softening for a moment, revealing the girl who'd once braided Nora's hair under starlit skies back in Minnesota. Ingrid had sacrificed her own dreams, whispers of a life in San Francisco, far from the frontier's bite, to protect her sister after their parents' deaths. But strength came at a cost. Ingrid's size had scared off suitors, leaving her alone, her heart armored thicker than the ranch's weathered gate. Nora shook her head, a faint smile tugging at her lips despite the ache. "You say that like it's simple. Who'd want a widow with nothing but debts and a sister who could wrestle a steer?" "Plenty," Ingrid replied, though doubt flickered in her expression. She straightened, her height brushing the low beams. "Tomorrow, the cattle drive passes through. Ranchers from the north, tough as leather. I'll watch them, test them. My husband must be strong, yours too if he claims you." It was half jest, half vow, born from Ingrid's unyielding code. No man would touch Nora unless he proved worthy body and soul. As dusk painted the sky in bruised purples, the sisters sat on the porch, the silence between them heavy with unspoken fears. Nora's thoughts drifted to the Apache lands beyond the ridge, where her father had once bartered tools for woven baskets, speaking of the Chiricahua people's quiet wisdom amid the whites' endless clamor. Prejudice poisoned the town, tales of raids and savagery. But Nora wondered if true danger lay not in the desert's shadows, but in the hearts of those who built walls against understanding. Hoofbeats shattered the quiet, distant at first, then growing like thunder. Ingrid rose, her silhouette a bulwark against the fading light. A lone rider approached, dust swirling around his horse's legs. He was broad-shouldered, clad in a weathered duster and Stetson, a Winchester slung across his back. Not from the drive, Nora realized. His path veered from the main trail as if drawn by some unseen pull. The man reined in, tipping his hat. "Evenin', ma'ams. Name's Elias Kane. Heard tell of water closer to the hills, but my mount's lathered. Mind if I trouble you for a trough?" His voice was steady, laced with the drawl of Texas plains, but his eyes, dark and watchful, held a depth that spoke of more than dusty trails. Ingrid crossed her arms, her stance unyielding as the mesa behind them. "Depends. You got a strong back, mister, or just a strong thirst?" Elias dismounted, his movements fluid, unhurried. He met her gaze without flinching, a faint scar tracing his jaw like a map of old battles. "Strong enough for what's needed, I reckon. And you?" Nora's pulse quickened, the air charged with the promise of change or ruin. Little did they know, Elias carried secrets of his own. A mother from the Apache ways, a life straddling two worlds, where mercy had been his hardest lesson. As the stars began to prick the sky, the test had begun, subtle as a whisper, fierce as the coming storm. If you were Nora, facing a stranger at your door in the dead of night, would you invite him in or send him packing? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Elias Kane's horse snorted, steam rising from its flanks in the cooling evening air, as if echoing the tension that hung between the three figures on the porch. Nora watched from her chair, her fingers tightening around the locket until the edges bit into her skin. The stranger's presence felt like a sudden gust through the ranch's stagnant quiet, a disruption she both craved and feared. Ingrid loomed like an ancient oak, her arms still crossed, sizing him up with the same scrutiny she reserved for faulty fence posts or unreliable weather. "Thirst's a fair trade for labor," Ingrid said finally, her voice steady but laced with challenge. She nodded toward the corral, where a few scrawny steers lowed mournfully against the fence. "That gate's been sagging since the last windstorm. Fix it proper, and the trough's yours. Fail, and you ride on dry-mouthed." Elias didn't hesitate. He looped his reins over the post and shrugged off his duster, revealing a shirt stained with trail dust and the faint outline of muscles honed by years of wrangling cattle across unforgiving plains. "Fair enough," he replied, his tone even, betraying no offense. As he strode to the corral, Nora caught a glimpse of the rawhide bracelet on his wrist, etched with patterns that whispered of desert canyons and ancient chants, marks of a heritage not fully hidden by his settler's garb. Ingrid followed at a distance, her boots crunching the gravel while Nora trailed behind, her steps tentative on the uneven ground. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky a canvas of deepening indigo, stars emerging like hesitant promises. The air cooled rapidly, carrying the sharp tang of creosote bushes awakening in the twilight. Elias worked methodically, prying loose boards with a bar from his saddlebag, his hands sure despite the fading light. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but he moved without complaint, hammering nails with rhythmic precision that spoke of a man who knew the value of endurance. Nora leaned against the fence, her heart a quiet drum in her chest. Who was he, really? The scar on his jaw caught the last rays, pulling her gaze. It wasn't from a barroom brawl, she sensed. Too clean, too deliberate, like a ritual mark. Her mind wandered to stories her father had shared around the fire, of Apache scouts who navigated the borderlands with eyes that saw through lies, blending into the land like shadows. Elias's features held that blend, the strong line of his nose, the depth in his eyes that mirrored the vastness of the territory itself. Why the test? Elias asked over his shoulder, not pausing in his labor. A board thudded into place, secure and true. You don't strike me as the sort to turn away a rider in need. Ingrid snorted, wiping her hands on her apron. Need goes both ways out here. We've got mouths to feed and land to hold. A man who can't lift his weight ain't worth the water he drinks. Her words were blunt, but beneath them lay a vulnerability Nora knew well. The fear of betrayal, of inviting weakness into their fragile world. Ingrid had chased off 2 suitors in the past year alone, one with a single glare, the other after he blanched at the sight of her hauling a fallen beam alone. My sister deserves better than some drifter who folds at the first hardship. Elias paused then, straightening to meet Ingrid's stare. The corral gate now stood firm, a testament to his skill, but his expression softened, revealing a flicker of understanding. Strength ain't just in the arms, ma'am. Seen plenty of big men break under smaller loads. He glanced at Nora, his dark eyes holding hers for a beat longer than propriety allowed. It's in the keeping on, when the world's set against you. Nora felt a warmth creep into her cheeks, unbidden and unfamiliar. No man had looked at her that way since Thomas, not with curiosity, but with a quiet recognition of the battles she carried inside. She thought of the nights she'd lain awake, the ranch's walls closing in, wondering if she'd ever escape the label of poor widow Svensk, pitied and passed over. Elias's words stirred something dormant, a spark of possibility amid the ashes of her grief. As the gate's final nail sank home, Ingrid tested it with her full weight, the wood creaking but holding. She nodded grudgingly. Passable. Come inside for supper then. But mind, this ain't charity. Dawn brings more work. They ate in the dim glow of a lantern, the table sparse with cornbread and beans stretched thin with wild onions. Conversation flowed haltingly at first, Ingrid's questions probing like fence posts into soft earth. Where from? Texas, Elias said. Born to a rancher father and a mother who'd known the Chiricahua ways before the treaties scattered her people. He spoke of her sparingly, with a reverence that painted her not as a ghost of the wild, but as a teacher of survival, how to read the wind's shift before a raid, to find water in cracked arroyos, to offer mercy even to enemies who deserved none. Nora listened, her spoon hovering midair. Prejudice had poisoned Tucson like bad water. The saloon talk brimmed with tales of Apache savages, yet here was a man whose blood bridged those worlds, his voice carrying the weight of unspoken losses. Your mother. She must have been brave, Nora ventured softly, her voice barely above the crackle of the fire. Elias's gaze met hers again, a shadow crossing his features. Brave, and broken by it. Taught me that compassion's the hardest fight, costs more than any bullet. He pushed his plate away, the lines around his eyes deepening. Ingrid watched him closely, her skepticism thawing just a fraction. But Nora sensed the test evolving, delving deeper than physical toil. Outside, the desert whispered its nocturnal secrets, coyotes yipping in the distance like echoes of forgotten kin. As Elias stepped onto the porch to tend his horse, Nora followed, the cool night air a balm against her skin. Why stop here? She asked, her breath visible in the chill. The drive's trail is safer. He turned, the moonlight etching silver along his scar. Trails lie straight, but life's crooked. Felt a pull toward this place, like unfinished business. His words hung between them, heavy with implication, as Ingrid's silhouette appeared in the doorway, a silent guardian. In that moment, Nora wondered if strength lay not in towering heights or unyielding resolve, but in the fragile bridges built across divides. The night deepened, promising trials that would test them all, body and soul. What would you risk for a chance at connection in a world that demands proof? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Dawn broke over the ranch like a reluctant promise, the first light gilding the jagged peaks of the Catalinas in hues of rose and gold. Nora stirred from a fitful sleep, the thin blanket tangled around her legs, her dreams haunted by echoes of Elias's voice, steady, resonant, carrying the cadence of canyons and campfires. The house felt different this morning, charged with an undercurrent she couldn't name, as if the stranger's presence had stirred the dust of possibility into the air. Ingrid was already up, her massive form silhouetted against the stove as she coaxed flames to life with dry mesquite twigs. The scent of boiling chicory root filled the small kitchen, a poor substitute for coffee but better than nothing. "He's out by the barn," she said without turning, her voice gruff but not unkind. "Tended his horse before the roosters crowed. Quiet type, that one." Nora nodded, slipping into her worn apron, her fingers brushing the locket at her throat. Sleep had softened the edges of her wariness, but questions lingered like the chill in the corners of the room. Elias's words about his mother replayed in her mind. Brave and broken, a woman who'd navigated the treacherous border between worlds. In Tucson, such mixed blood marked a man as suspect, whispered about in saloons as half-breed trouble. Yet here he was, mending their gate without a grudge, his eyes holding no deceit. Outside, the desert awoke in layers, the low hum of insects rising from the scrub, the distant call of a quail piercing the stillness. Elias emerged from the barn, rolling his sleeves higher on his forearms, the rawhide bracelet catching the light. He carried a coil of rope over one shoulder, his Stetson pushed back to reveal sweat-dampened hair. "Morning," he greeted, his drawl warm against the crisp air. "Figured I'd check the windmill. Heard it groaning last night like a soul in torment." Ingrid eyed him, her arms crossed like barriers. The windmill stood at the edge of their parched field, its blades frozen in disrepair, a skeletal relic of better rains. "That old beast's been stuck since spring. Takes a strong pull to free it. Ropes and muscle, no shortcuts." Her tone was a gauntlet thrown, the test unspoken but clear. "Prove your mettle beyond supper talk." Elias met her gaze, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "No shortcuts needed. Lead the way." As they walked toward the field, Nora followed at a pace, the gravel crunching under her boots like brittle bones. The sun climbed higher, baking the earth, and already heat shimmered off the ground in waves that distorted the horizon. Ingrid's plan unfolded in Nora's mind. She'd seen her sister devise such trials before, pushing men until their facades cracked, revealing the frailty beneath. But Elias moved with purpose, uncoiling the rope and fashioning a harness around the mill's rusted arm, his knots precise, born of necessity rather than show. "Pull when you're ready," Ingrid said, positioning herself to brace the base. She glanced at Nora, a silent command. "Watch closely." Elias gripped the rope, his boots digging into the soil for leverage. Muscles corded under his shirt as he heaved, the fibers straining against the mill's inertia. It budged an inch, then stuck fast, groaning in protest. Sweat traced paths down his temples, but he adjusted his stance, drawing on some inner reserve, his breath steady despite the burn. Nora's heart clenched, a mix of admiration and unease. She thought of Thomas, strong in his quiet way but felled by illness that no labor could outrun. Strength, Elias had said, was in the keeping on. As the minutes stretched, the sun's glare intensified, turning the task into a crucible. Ingrid added her weight to the effort, her powerful arms joining the pull, but even she grunted with the strain. "Come on, rancher," she muttered, half encouragement, half taunt. "My husband must be strong, stronger than this rust-eaten contraption." Elias didn't reply, his focus absolute, jaw set against the scar that seemed to pulse with each heave. Finally, with a metallic screech that echoed across the valley, the arm jerked free, spinning lazily in the breeze. Water trickled from the spout, dark and precious, pooling in the trough below. He released the rope, hands raw and blistered, but stood tall, wiping his brow with the back of his arm. There. Should turn proper now. Ingrid released a breath she hadn't realized she held, clapping him on the shoulder with enough force to stagger a lesser man. He didn't flinch. "Not bad," she admitted, the ice in her voice thawing further. "But the day's young. Harlan Pritchard's due by noon. Come to press his claim on the north pasture. You'll stand with us?" Elias nodded, his eyes flicking to Nora, who stood a few paces away, her face flushed from the heat and something deeper. "If you'll have me." The offer hung simple, yet laden. A bridge extended across the chasm of their solitude. They returned to the house for a midday meal of cold biscuits and the fresh water, the mood lighter, conversation turning to the land's unforgiving rhythms. Elias spoke of his travels, skirting the painful edges of his past. A father lost to a border skirmish, a mother who taught him the Apache art of listening to the land's whispers, winds that foretold rain, tracks that revealed hidden foes. She said mercy's like water in the desert, he told Nora quietly, as Ingrid stepped out to check the fence line. Rare, but it sustains when nothing else will. Nora traced the rim of her mug, the coolness grounding her. Tucson's full of men who'd sooner shoot than share a drop. Your mother's ways. They sound like a different kind of strength. Her voice held a tremor, the admission of her own prejudices surfacing, years of town gossip painting the Apache as shadows to fear, not kin to respect. Yet Elias embodied neither savage nor saint. He was flesh and resolve, scarred by the same world's cruelties. He leaned forward slightly, his presence steadying the air between them. Strength that bends, not breaks, like you holding this place together. The words landed soft, stirring a warmth in her chest that chased away the chill of isolation. For the first time in months, Nora felt seen, not as the fragile widow, but as a woman with roots deep as the mesquite. Hoofbeats interrupted the moment, distant thunder growing nearer. Ingrid burst through the door, her face set like flint. Pritchard and his boys, 3 of them, armed. He's not here for talk. Elias rose smoothly, his hand instinctively brushing the Colt at his hip, but his eyes sought Nora's, a silent vow in their depths. The test had shifted, from rope and rust to something far deadlier, where compassion's cost would be paid in lead or grace. If a stranger offered to stand against a threat to your home, would you trust him with your life? Let me know in the comments. The dust cloud swelled as Harlan Pritchard's riders crested the ridge, their silhouettes sharp against the relentless sky. Nora's pulse thrummed in her ears. The ranch no longer a sanctuary but a battleground waiting to ignite. Nora pressed her palms against the rough-hewn table, the wood splinters grounding her as fear coiled tight in her gut. The hoofbeats crescendoed into a rumble that vibrated through the floorboards, shaking loose motes of dust from the rafters. Ingrid moved to the window, her broad shoulders blocking half the view, while Elias positioned himself by the door, his hand resting lightly on the Colt's grip. Not drawn, but ready, a coiled serpent in the grass. Stay inside, Ingrid murmured to Nora, her voice a low thunder that brooks no argument. But Nora couldn't tear her eyes away, stepping closer to peer through the warped glass. Harlan Pritchard rode at the fore, a weasel-faced man in his 40s, his suit coat ill-fitting over a belly softened by saloon whiskey and easy claims. Flanking him were 2 rough-hewn types, hired guns, their holsters low and tied down, faces shadowed by wide brims. They reined in at the corral, horses snorting and stamping, kicking up clouds that choked the midday sun. Pritchard dismounted with a flourish, his boots hitting the dirt like a judge's gavel. Ingrid Svensk, Nora, time's up on that note your pa signed. North Pasture's mine by law. Debts don't vanish with prayers. His voice carried oily confidence, laced with the town's disdain for the foreign widows who'd outlasted their betters. The men behind him chuckled, one spitting a stream of tobacco that arced into the dust. Ingrid strode out first, her frame filling the doorway like a storm front, Elias a step behind, his presence quiet but unyielding. Nora hovered in the threshold, the heat pressing against her skin like an unwanted touch. Law's one thing, Harlan, Ingrid called, her accent thickening with anger. Stealing from women who've bled for this land is another. Pa's note was for seed, not your greed. We've got water flowing now, crops'll come. Pritchard's laugh was sharp, a blade unsheathed. Water? That trickle won't save you from the bank. And who's this? His eyes narrowed on Elias, flicking to the rawhide bracelet, the scar. Some half-breed stray you picked up? Tucson don't take kindly to Apache sympathizers fouling settler dirt. The slur hung heavy, igniting a spark in Nora's chest. Prejudice she'd swallowed too long, now tasting bitter on her tongue. Elias didn't flinch, his dark eyes steady as canyon walls. Name's Kane, and I'm here by invitation. Debts get settled fair, or not at all. His words were measured, carrying the weight of his mother's lessons. Speak truth, but let actions carve the path. Pritchard's face twisted, signaling his men to fan out, hands hovering near irons. The air thickened, silence stretching taut as a bowstring. Nora's breath caught. She'd seen tempers flare in town, ending in graves dusted over by wind. But Elias stepped forward, not aggressive, placing himself between the riders and the house. No need for lead today. Ranch stands. You want the pasture? Earn it proper. Fence it. Work it, like any man. One of the gunmen sneered, drawing slow. Earn. We take what's owed. His fingers twitched, but Ingrid moved like lightning for her size, grabbing a pitchfork from the wall and leveling it, the tines glinting. Try it, and you'll plant your own marker here. Tension peaked, the desert holding its breath, until Pritchard raised a hand, calculating. Bullets would draw the sheriff, and whispers of Apache ties could turn the town against him, too. Fine. 1 week. Pay up or clear out. He mounted, his men following suit, the retreat a temporary mercy born of caution. As they rode off, dust swallowing their forms, Nora exhaled, her knees weak. The ranch survived another breath, but the threat lingered like smoke. Inside, the air cooled as shadows lengthened, the confrontation's echo fading into weary relief. Ingrid slumped into a chair, her hands trembling for the first time Nora could recall. That slimy cur. He'd sell his own shadow for a claim. She looked at Elias, appraisal sharpening. You didn't draw. Smart or soft? Elias poured water from the fresh bucket, offering her a tin cup first. Drawing ends things quick. Keeping on. That's the real fight. He turned to Nora, his gaze softening the room's harsh edges. You all right? She nodded, though her heart raced still, the locket's chain cool against her heated skin. Better than expected. Thank you for standing. In that moment, she saw him clearer. Not a savior from tales, but a man shaped by borders crossed unwillingly, his Chiricahua blood a bridge rather than a barrier. Her father's old trades flickered in memory, bartering with Apache for knowledge of the land, not fear of its people. Prejudice had blinded her, but Elias's calm challenged it, whispering of understanding forged in shared hardship. Ingrid rose, resolve hardening her features. 1 week's grace, but Pritchard won't wait. We need more than words. Real strength to hold this place. Her eyes locked on Elias, the test reigniting. The irrigation ditch to the north fields clogged with years of silt, miles long, backbreaking. Clear it by dusk tomorrow, alone, and maybe you'll prove worthy of supper again. My husband must be strong enough to collapse before he quits. Elias met her challenge without protest, rolling his shoulders as if shrugging off the day's weight. Dawn it is. Nora watched him step out to check his horse, the sunset painting him in fiery strokes. Doubt gnawed at her. Could he endure what Ingrid demanded? Yet in his quiet acceptance, she glimpsed redemption's path. Mercy not as weakness, but as the endurance that redefined family. As night fell, stars wheeling overhead like indifferent witnesses, Nora lay awake, the desert's hush amplifying her thoughts. Compassion's cost rose before her, a ditch to be dug through layers of silt and suspicion. Ingrid's snores rumbled from the next room, a guardian's vigil. But Nora wondered if true protection lay in yielding, in trusting the stranger who'd already begun to unearth her buried hopes. The windmill creaked softly in the breeze, a reminder of labors past, as the ranch braced for the trial ahead, one that would test flesh and forge bonds in the unforgiving fire of the frontier. If faced with a deadline that could cost your home, would you push a stranger to his limits or find another way? Share in the comments. The first light of dawn filtered through the cottonwood shutters, casting elongated shadows across the kitchen floor, like fingers reaching for secrets buried in the dust. Nora rose quietly, her bare feet cold against the packed earth, the weight of the previous day's standoff still pressing on her chest like an unyielding stone. Sleep had come in fragments, haunted by the echo of Pritchard's retreating hoofbeats and the promise of Elias's trial, a ditch to be clawed from the reluctant soil, a measure of will that Ingrid wielded like a blacksmith's hammer. Outside, the air held the crisp bite of morning, dew clinging to the sparse grass like fragile jewels before the sun could claim them. Elias was already at work, his figure a solitary silhouette against the north field's edge, shovel biting into the silt-choked channel with methodical fury. The irrigation ditch stretched like a scar across the parched land, its banks overgrown with thorny mesquite and choked by years of neglect. Flash floods and neglect turning what was once a lifeline into a grave for water's hope. Nora watched from the porch, a tin mug of chicory steaming in her hands, the bitter aroma grounding her amid the swirl of doubt. Ingrid joined her, wiping sleep from her eyes, her massive frame creaking the step as she descended. "Let him dig," she said, voice rough as gravel. "Strength shows in the sweat, not the talk. If he folds before dusk, he's no anchor for us." Her words carried the armor of protection, forged from a lifetime of shielding Nora from the world's cruelties, the fever that stole Thomas, the town's whispers labeling them outsiders with their Swedish roots, and whispered ties to the land's original keepers. Yet beneath it, Nora sensed the crack, Ingrid's own loneliness, a giant's isolation in a world that revered fragility in women. As the sun climbed, heat radiating from the earth in shimmering waves, Elias's rhythm never faltered. The shovel's scrape mingled with the distant low of steers, each strike unearthing layers of compacted mud, roots twisting like buried resentments. Nora ventured closer after midday, carrying a canteen of the precious windmill water, her skirt hem brushing the dry weeds. The scent of turned soil rose sharp and mineral, mingling with the salt of his exertion. Blisters wept on his palms, staining the handle red, but his breaths came even, measured as if drawing from some deeper well. Lessons from a mother who navigated Apache trails with the patience of arroyos carving stone. "You're pushing too hard," Nora said softly, offering the canteen. Her hand brushed his, rough and fever-hot, sending a jolt through her like static from wool. Up close, the scar on his jaw gleamed with sweat, a reminder of wounds that healed but never vanished. She thought of her father's tales again, of Chiricahua women who mended not just hides, but the fractures between peoples, trading stories over shared fires. Elias's heritage wasn't a shadow to fear, but a thread weaving resilience into the frontier's harsh tapestry. He paused, gulping the water, his throat working visibly. Dark eyes met hers, holding a quiet intensity that stripped away the ranch's isolation. Pushing's what keeps the ditch open, and the heart from closing. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, glancing toward the ridge where Apache scouts once signaled kin with mirrored flashes. "My mother taught me that. After the raid scattered her band, she dug her own paths, literal and otherwise. Mercy ain't free. It demands you keep going when the ground fights back." Nora's fingers tightened on the canteen, the cool metal a contrast to the fire building in her veins. Prejudice had been her chain, forged in Tucson saloons where half-breed was spat like a curse, ignoring the wisdom that bridged worlds. Elias's words chipped at it, revealing her own flaws, the self-doubt that kept her huddled in the ranch's ruins, waiting for rescue rather than claiming the land as her own. I've judged quick," she admitted, voice barely above the shovel's echo. "Feared what I didn't know, but you've given more than labor already." A faint smile cracked his dust-caked face, softening the lines of endurance. "Judgment's the real silt. Clears with time." He returned to the work, but the moment lingered, a seed planted in the furrow between them. Romance's whisper, born of mutual scars rather than stolen glances. By afternoon, the sun beat down like a forge hammer, the ditch half cleared, water's promise glinting in the exposed bed. Ingrid appeared then, her shadow falling long across the labor, arms crossed in appraisal. "Halfway. But the worst is downstream. Roots like iron, silt thick as lies." Her challenge hung, testing not just his body but the bonds forming. Elias nodded, no retort, plunging the shovel deeper. Nora retreated to the house, kneading dough for flatbread, her mind a whirlwind. Ingrid's tests were mercy in disguise, pushing away weakness to make space for true alliance. But at what cost? Elias's frame sagged slightly now, shoulders rounding under the relentless assault, yet he pressed on, each scoop a defiance of collapse. As dusk bled crimson across the sky, coyotes began their evening chorus, a haunting harmony to the desert's hush. Nora stepped out again, the air cooling to a balm carrying the earthy tang of unearthed soil. Elias straightened from the final stretch, the ditch now a clear vein ready for the next rain, his shirt clinging like a second skin, breath ragged. He leaned on the shovel, face ashen beneath the grime, but triumph flickered in his eyes, until his knees buckled, the tool clattering as he sank to the bank, chest heaving. Ingrid approached, her steps measured, expression unreadable. Collapsed, but finished. She extended a hand, pulling him up with ease, the gesture a bridge crossed. Nora rushed forward, heart pounding, slipping an arm around his waist to steady him. His weight against her was solid, human, the scent of sweat and soil enveloping her like an embrace. "You proved it," she whispered, the words tasting of redemption. In that collapse, strength revealed itself, not in unbroken stride, but in the rise that followed, redefining family amid the frontier's unforgiving code. The three stood there as stars pierced the velvet night, the ranch's silence now shared, laced with the promise of waters flowing true. But Pritchard's shadow loomed, his week's grace ticking away, demanding a final stand where compassion's price would be etched in the dust. If you saw someone pushed to their breaking point for your sake, would you pull them back, or let the test run its course? Tell me in the comments below. The night air wrapped the ranch in a shroud of velvet quiet, broken only by the occasional creak of the windmill's freed blades turning lazy circles against the starlit sky. Nora supported Elias's weight as they made their way back to the house, his arm heavy across her shoulders, each step a testament to the endurance that had just been forged in the ditch's unyielding grip. Ingrid flanked them, her usual stride slowed to match, the giantess's silence speaking volumes. Approval, perhaps, or the dawning realization that strength could be shared, not hoarded like scarce water. Inside, the lantern's glow cast warm pools on the table, where Nora eased Elias into a chair. His face, streaked with grime and exhaustion, held no complaint, only a quiet satisfaction that mirrored the land's subtle shifts after rain. She fetched a basin of water from the pump, dipping a cloth to clean his blistered hands, the coolness drawing a hiss from his lips. "Rest now," she murmured, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. Ingrid hovered nearby, brewing a poultice from yarrow leaves gathered at dawn, a remedy from their mother's Swedish lore, blended with desert herbs Elias had mentioned in passing. "You didn't have to finish," Ingrid said finally, her rumble softened by the fire's crackle. She pressed the poultice to his palms, her touch gentle for all its power. "Most would have quit at the roots." Elias met her gaze, his dark eyes reflecting the flames like hidden arroyos. "Quitting digs a deeper grave. My mother, she collapsed plenty, hauling her kin across the border after the soldiers came, but she rose each time, teaching that mercy starts with yourself, then extends." His words wove through the room, challenging the walls of prejudice Nora had built around her heart. In Tucson, Apache blood meant suspicion, raids whispered in every shadow, but Elias revealed the human cost. Families torn, wisdom bartered for survival, not savagery. Nora's fingers paused on the cloth, the locket at her throat a sudden weight. She'd clung to it as anchor to Thomas's memory, but now it felt like a chain, binding her to loss rather than life. Ingrid's tests had stripped away illusions, forcing Nora to confront her own frailty. Not just the widow's isolation, but the internalized scorn that kept her small, judging others before they could judge her. "You've given us more than labor," she said, meeting Elias's eyes. "You've shown what family could be, beyond blood or borders." The week passed in a blur of mending and preparation, the ranch stirring to life under their combined efforts. Elias's knowledge of the land proved invaluable. He rerouted a shallow seep to bolster the ditch, his Chiricahua intuition reading the soil's thirst like a map of old trails. Ingrid's skepticism melted into partnership, her laughter rumbling during shared meals as Elias recounted tales of his mother's woven baskets, intricate patterns that held stories of endurance. Nora felt agency bloom within her, no longer the fragile observer, but a force claiming her place, mending fences with calloused hands, bartering with passing traders for seed that echoed her father's old ways. Yet Pritchard's deadline loomed, the seventh dawn breaking fierce and cloudless, heat already rising like a fever. Hoofbeats shattered the morning hush sooner than expected, the dust cloud larger this time, swollen with reinforcements. 4 riders now, Pritchard at the helm, his face twisted in greed-fueled fury. Nora stood on the porch with Ingrid and Elias, her heart pounding but her spine straight, the locket tucked away like shed skin. No more hiding. Pritchard dismounted, his men spreading out, hands itching for holsters. Time's up, Svensks. Banks foreclosed, north pasture and all. Pack your Swede rags and skedaddle. His sneer swept over Elias, venom sharpening. And take your breed mongrel with you. Towns heard whispers. Won't abide Apache trash squatting on white land. The slur ignited the air, but Nora stepped forward first, her voice cutting through like a knife through silk. This land's ours by sweat and seed, Harlan, not your paper lies. Pa's note was coerced after the drought when you loaned at usury rates no Christian would touch. She drew a breath, the desert wind whipping her skirts, grounding her in the earth's unyielding pulse. We've cleared the ditch, coaxed water from stone. Sell us the note fare or face the sheriff with your books. Tucson's growing. Railroad men won't favor a claim built on widows' tears. Pritchard's eyes widened, caught off guard by her fire. Ingrid's tests had tempered Nora into steel, her agency a revelation even to her sister. Elias remained still, his presence a quiet bulwark, but his hand stayed from his gun. Mercy's choice, letting words carve the path. The rancher blustered, signaling his men, but Ingrid shifted, her towering form a living barrier, pitchfork in hand once more. Try taking it, she growled, and you'll dig your own ditch. Tension coiled, the sun's glare turning sweat to salt on skin. Pritchard calculated, glancing at the cleared field, the windmill turning proud, proof of renewal that undercut his tale of ruin. Whispers of Elias's heritage could turn the town, but Nora's stand reframed it. Not division, but alliance against greed. Damn you, he spat, remounting. I'll see you in court. But his retreat was swift, dust trailing defeat, the threat deferred by her courage. As the riders vanished over the ridge, relief washed over the ranch like monsoon rain. Ingrid clapped Nora's shoulder, pride etching her features. You spoke for us all, little one. Strength in the voice, too. Elias nodded, his scar catching the light, a smile breaking through. Redefined the fight. Like my mother said, compassion clears the way. In the weeks that followed, the ranch bloomed. First sprouts piercing the soil, watered by the ditch's faithful flow. Pritchard's claim crumbled under scrutiny from a traveling judge, swayed by Nora's ledgers and the testimony of fair-minded traders. Elias stayed, not as savior, but partner, his Apache-rooted wisdom weaving into their days, teaching Nora to read the stars for seasons, Ingrid to not rawhide with cultural grace, prejudice's silt washed away in shared labors, family redefined not by towers or trails, but by the mercy that bound them. Years later, under a sky heavy with promise, Nora stood by the windmill, her hand on a growing belly. Elias at her side, Ingrid's laughter echoing from the porch. The frontier's cost lingered, scars, losses, but compassion's harvest sustained, a bridge across divides where understanding took root. If you were Nora, claiming your voice in the face of threats, what words would you choose? Share in the comments below. If you're loving these incredible stories from the Old West, hit that subscribe button because we've got so many more tales of courage and unexpected heroes waiting for you.